Alright, back here working on the 96 Camaro 5.3 slot with a turbo. So it cuts out when you roll into boost now. I've had a couple people say close the plug gap up, but you know, this didn't start happening until after I changed the fuel lines and put the pumps in the fuel tank. Honestly think I got an injector clogged up, which I did try to energize those and spray them out with carburetor cleaner, or I don't think there's enough volts getting in my trunk. I used 10 gauge wire back to the trunk, but that power block, well, after it goes through the relay, it seems like that's where it loses a full volt at. And for some reason, at one wide open throttle, according to the scanner, I'm losing a volt. Well, I should be gaining. It should be right around idle. It's like 13.5, and then when you go wide open throttle, it's supposed to go to 14 something. But this is a new alternator, and we did get a bunch of fuel and oil on it. So I don't know. The alternator could be, I don't know. I got an oil leak in my other line that it sprayed oil all over it. And then when I was taking these fuel lines off to clean the injectors out, they got a bunch of fuel on it. So I don't know. Either the injector's dirty or I'm not getting enough volts to the trunk or to the pumps, because I had these injectors working just fine with the spark plug gap that's in it. But Christopher's car, we closed up the plug gap on his, because his was at 30-35 just like this one is. We closed the plug gap on his and it did seem to run better, so need to close the spark plug gap up regardless. See if it still does it. If it does it, still does it, I guess I'll get the injectors cleaned. If it still does it after that, then towards it losing voltage to the pumps. I don't know. I just know it didn't start doing this until I put that surge tank in there and these 10 AN 8 AN lines, so we'll see. Alright, spark plugs are out. They all look the same, but they're gapped at 30, 35. So we'll close the gap up on them. I'm just out here on my lunch break. Lunch break is already over, so after lunch I'll pull the other side out and I'm going to ohm these wires out too to make sure they all read the same. Alright, it's a different day. I'm out here on lunch break and I'm pulling the plugs out of the passenger side, and I got up in there to pull them out. I stuck my head in a spider's nest, I guess, and it come running across my eyeball, freaked me out. But anyway, I pulled the plugs out of this side, and these have got a lot of oil on the threads. I mean, look at that. But I mean, as far as the top goes, everything looks like it was burning good, but especially this one. See that? That's how much oil's coming out of it. I don't know where that's coming from. But all these look about the same as far as the top of them, just the oil on the threads. I don't know why it would be doing that. Let's come over here and look. I mean, the valve covers ain't leaking, so it ain't coming from that. Look down in here. Where am I? I don't know. Can y'all see good down in there? It was especially bad on this one. It's the front too on both sides. Well, looking at this from the first time, it looks like either something's coming out of there or something's draining down in there. I don't know. They seem to be be the worst. See, like this back one, it's not that bad. That one's got a little on it. That one's got a little on it. And this one's got a lot on it. That one's got a whole lot on it. And these two are dry. Alright, Saturday morning I went to the parts store. I got some new plugs. I'm going to run I had the BR6EF. These are non-extended tip. These are ones you got to use on nitrous, but we're turbo now, but I'm still going to go with a non-extended tip. I'm going to go with the I'm going to go one colder. I'm going to go with the BR7EF this time. And I'm going to gap those to 20. I'm just going to use a filler gauge. Stick it in there, and I'm going to use a 20 filler gauge, stick it in there, and just kind of tap it down on some wood. And there we go. 0.020 filler gauge. I just got a light drag right there. Light drag. And I'm going to call that good. Go on to the next one. Do all 8 of them like that. And I just beat this part on this wooden table. And I got some new stock plug wires also. I think I'll put these in as I finish gapping them. So we'll go ahead and put this one in. And I'll just do all 8 of them. And we'll take it for a ride and see what it does. Alright, spark plugs are all in. All brand new spark plug wires. They're all gapped about 20, 22, somewhere in there. And I went ahead and took the gauge out of the fuel pressure regulator, because I'm going to put this in, and I'm going to run that up to the windshield so we can keep an eye on our fuel pressure as well while we're driving it. Alright, and I got the gauge taped up there. I'm going to mount the GoPro right there, so hopefully the GoPro will be able to see it. It should. So just so y'all know, that is a vacuum reference fuel pressure regulator. At idle, on port throttle cruise, it should be read low 40s. At wide open throttle, before you get into boost, it should read 50. And then we get into boost, it should read an extra pound for every pound of boost. So I think I got it set up to only go up to about 4 pounds. So it should read 54, 55 at wide open throttle with boost. Alright, so first thing I noticed, the vacuum's not lowering my fuel pressure like it should. I got both pumps running though. That should lower down to about 45. It's staying right at 50. Just had the 525 liter per hour pump in the trunk, it was lowering to about 44 at idle with the vacuum connected. Alright, I lowered about, those highlighted 8 tables, I lowered about 10% fuel. Let me turn the light off. That's glare from the sun. Yeah, I lowered 10% fuel in those tables, 100 up, and then I just blended in between 70 and 100 kPa. See what that does, because it was at like 10.5 AFR. Alright, let's try this again. I lowered the fuel tables about 10%. Wide open throttle. Well, them first couple pulls, it didn't seem like it was there, but on the way, after I changed the fueling, it got worse. But the AFR gauge said 11.5. Maybe my AFR gauge is reading wrong and it just wants more fuel. I don't know. Well, since taking 10% fuel out made it worse, but that made the AFR gauge read dead on. I mean dead on, 11.5, 11.6. I'm gonna put that 10% fuel back and maybe add a couple more and see if it gets better. Driving around, it does fine. It only does it when you start to get into boost. See? It seems to start to get into boost. And when I first started driving it, it wasn't that bad. But it gets worse and worse the more you drive it. I don't know. I hate to throw parts at something, but they needed plugs and wires anyway. But I guess clean the fuel injectors, see if that does anything. I don't think it's the fuel system. I think the fuel system got dirt in the injectors. I think that's what's caused it. But I mean, looking at the fuel pressure gauge, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to, especially now. See, even at cruise, it's going down to like 45, about where it should be under vacuum. When as you saw on the GoPro, when I get on it, it goes up from 50, 51 is where it's set at base with the vacuum unhooked. It goes up 1 to 1. Nope, no power steering. So I don't think I think the fuel system's doing exactly what it's supposed to. I think where you cut and do them lines, you're supposed to run fluid through them. And the way I did it, I accidentally ran fluid through them unintentionally, and I think it got in the injectors. When you first cut and do them lines, it makes a lot of dirt. Oh, nope, I understand. It makes a lot of dirt, and I think some of that dirt got in one of the injectors. The funny thing is, it does it worse when it gets warmed up, so I don't know why it does that. I mean, as you can see, we've stayed completely cool. We're getting good charge, good oil pressure. I don't know. I'll get the injectors clean. We'll try again, I guess. But what do y'all think? I had these 142-pound injectors working before the surge tank, and they were working just fine. It didn't cut out any. Even with the only problem I was having there was the injector duty cycle was getting too high. I think I was losing fuel pressure somehow, some way. But I did the surge tank, ran 8 AN, 10 AN, feed, 8 AN, return. Ran 10 gauge wire to the trunk, come off of that for the relays. They're 30 amp, 40 amp relays. I did change the alternator because the alternator went out, but I think I tested it after the alternator and everything worked fine. But I would think a dirty injector would have problems at cruise. The car drives just fine until you get into boost. It drives just fine. you get into boost, that's when it starts acting up. And the first 2 hits when the car was cooler, like I had just started it and drove down the road, it did them first 2 pulls fine, but the AFR was 10.5 to 10.9, and then the second set of pulls it barely done it, and the AFR was 11.5. So I put the tables back to where it was when it didn't do it. It did it worse. I mean, the car got up to, the hottest it got was 180, and there's nothing in the tune to change anything at that temperature. I don't have anything to where temperature or intake air temperature could change anything up until like 150 intake air temperature. It never got that hot intake air temperature, and it's like 230 before it changes any timing for the engine coolant temperature. So I have no clue. I guess I'll try to get the fuel injectors clean, see what that does. But what do y'all think? I mean, it didn't start doing this until after the surge tank, and maybe even after the alternator. I can't remember if I drove it after I put that new alternator on or not, but I do know it gets hot down there where that alternator's at, and that ain't a good thing. But I know some people that race these cars without an alternator. They just charge the battery up and make a pass and come back and good to go. But the car's charging good. You shut it off, it starts right back up. The starter ain't dragging or nothing. It's got good enough charge to crank it right back up. So I don't know. I really don't know. This one's got me stumbled.